Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cash Up, a weekly show where we'll converse with the great folks in DFIR. And today I'm super excited to be joined by Cindy Murphy. Cindy is the president of Tetra Defense, doing a variety of digital forensics and incident response work. Prior to her role at Tetra Defense, Cindy worked in law enforcement for 31 years, including 25 years with the Madison Police Department in Wisconsin, as well as serving in the U.S. Army. In addition to her forensic practice work, Cindy is an accomplished instructor. She has served as both an instructor and co-course author for SANS 4585 Advanced Smartphone Forensics and taught digital forensics at Madison College. She has a Master's of Science in Forensic Computing and Cybercrime Investigations from the University College Dublin. She's also the recipient of the Digital Forensics Examiner of the Year Award in the Forensic Forecast from 2012. In addition, she's also a member of the Hootenanny String Band, which was coincidentally the hardest answer in the Magnet Virtual Summit scavenger hunt. And with that, welcome, Cindy.
I just love that that's a thing. That was the hardest question of all the questions.
Well, everyone Googled it, and apparently there's another Cindy Murphy in another band that was called Dixiana, which was like an 80s country band. So that was kind of fun. It was also hard to spell, so it was a good fun for everyone.
Absolutely.
And,
go ahead.
I was just going to say I want to apologize to everyone for the late start. In true 2020 fashion, right as we were starting, Cindy got a critical phone call that I believe she wants to share a little bit about what it is, because it's probably of value for people to know if they're in the current situation of the world. So
absolutely. So yes, in true Murphy's Law fashion and 2020 fashion, I want to take this opportunity before we get into forensics or anything about me, although this couldn't be more about me.
I think it's about as about you as you can get.
To say that yesterday on my birthday, my mom went to the ER after falling. Yes, happy birthday to me. And she has had a cough since the 9th. And so when she was at the ER after the fall, they tested her for COVID-19, and the phone call I got just before we were supposed to start here was the physician's assistant letting me know that she was positive. So for those of you who don't think it's real, or know someone who doesn't think it's real, or don't think it's going to affect you, it absolutely can. Wear your mask, because not wearing your mask, being lax about masks, is being lax about lives. My mom is 80. She'll be 81 near the end of August, and hopefully she's survived all sorts of other traumatic and other illnesses, and I'm hoping that she will come through this as well with flying colors. But that's what the delay was for. So. And
the other thing they informed Cindy of was that she had to start her quarantine officially now, because she's had contact with somebody who's COVID positive, which may be something that many of you are going through or aren't going through. But I think it's important just to recognize, if you haven't encountered someone who's going through this, now you have. And I mean, I just witnessed my first moment where I saw somebody receive a call where they were asked to start their quarantine because they had contact with somebody who is sick. And I wish your mother all the best. And she is a trooper. If anyone is a strong person who can make it through anything, she is so strong, and she has survivor instinct. And so all the best to her and to you for health.
And I think when we did our pre-start, I said I am in general a introvert, and so quarantining isn't scary or upsetting to me, but I am an extroverted introvert. So I will feel the loneliness, and I'm really regretting not going out for milk and creamer and yogurt yesterday. My brain's like, okay, how are the groceries coming in? So we'll be working on those apps, I guess, is the grocery app will be my new.
I hope that you can find delivery and get that all sorted. So we also just talked about your amazing introduction, and you've had such a unique, or maybe to some, but maybe not to others, but you've done a major change recently, or a couple years ago now, in moving from law enforcement into your work and becoming president of Tetra Defense. Can you tell us kind of how you got here?
Sure. I mean, the story about getting into forensics is one of being in the right place at the right time and literally falling into forensics. I was hurt on duty after a high-speed chase. I chased a person down, jumped a fence. Luckily, the gun he was carrying fell out when he jumped the fence ahead of me.
Oh, wow.
But caught him, but also didn't realize that I had caught the fence and lacerated my hamstring and messed myself up pretty badly. And so I had 8 months of healing to do and a busy brain, and just happened to be in a place where a detective was working on, a very early forensics case involving historical signatures being sold on bulletin boards. And the bulletin boards were hosted at MIT, and at MIT was a younger man by the name of Owen Casey.
Oh my gosh!
And so he and I didn't put that together until about 2012. But his first forensics case with law enforcement and my first forensics case
are the same.
In law enforcement are the same case.
Wow!
So that speaks to how small a community this is, and so that was how I caught the forensics bug, and I loved it from the beginning, and spent 17, 18 years of law enforcement career on that, and on trying to spread the word and get people trained and trained right, and to advocate for progressive training. Got involved with the Sands Institute, with my local community college, Madison College, and got involved with a lot of the different vendor trainings to try to help them improve the training to match what's going on in practice, which is so important. Bringing academia and practical application of forensics together is super important.
It's critical.
Yep. And so, 17, 18 years of very few resources, begging, borrowing, bartering, stealing. Well, not stealing. That would be against the law. Everything that I borrowed. But really, there was a lot of scrapping to get the toolkit that I needed. And, my department's still facing those same struggles. In 2016, I got a call from Scott Holowinski from Gilware Data Recovery. He's a guy I had worked with before when we had, crashed hard drives or a RAID failure that I needed to fix for free, right? Help me. When we had met at the WACI conference, I had collaborated with him and with several folks on his team at Gilware, and we started talking about what it would take to start a forensics business, and he was really asking for my advice, but already recruiting me, whether I knew it at that point. And that conversation quickly escalated into a job offer, and I was a year before retirement, minimum eligibility, and so I put him off and said, the timing's just not right. But he and his team kept working on me, and I went in for a visit, saw some of the amazing work they were doing with flash memory, with chip-offs, getting below the flash translation layer, recovering images from flash memory that would have read all zeros on any forensics tool I had access to. And pretty soon my brain was just asking one question: what are you waiting for? Like, what are you waiting for? There's more out there, and definitely more to learn. And it's time to grow, not to not to contract and be in your safe bubble. So I took a leave of absence in 2016. Our first case for Gilroy Digital Forensics was an $1,100 chip-off case for a local law enforcement agency in a homicide case, and that was our very first check. I still have the stub, and we grew from there. The first year we were doing mainly traditional forensics, and we kept having these calls creep in about ransomware, and we were doing some work on recovery and doing some work to advise people about how to prevent it. I was doing a lot of blogging about ransomware.
Yep.
But I hated it. I hated it because, in many cases, to get people's data back, it meant having conversations with and paying criminals. And, coming out of law enforcement, that was really hard. But I saw the necessity of it as well, because the alternative for so many businesses is just to shutter their doors, fire all their employees, and call it a day. It is the ultimate business loss if you lose the core set of data that your business works off of. So as we got more of those cases in, we brought Nathan Little on board to do some programming for us and to work. He had much more networking knowledge than I did, much more infrastructure knowledge than I did, just because of his background. And he didn't have those law enforcement hangups over doing some of this live incident response forensics collection work that while I had heard about it in training after training after training, it still felt foreign to me and somehow wrong, right? Against my initial instincts, right? And that's not so much my feeling about it now. Now I totally understand it and get it, but coming out of all of those years of law enforcement where the first rule is make no changes, all of that was new and scary.
I think you bring up a really good point, because there's a lot of people who transition out of law enforcement either at retirement or because of injury or some other life-changing event or just by choice into incident response. And we've spoken to quite a few people who have made that change here. For example, Brett Shavers. And you really touched on something. And I did a period where I went from government work into IR work, and then I went back. And I think you touched on something that most people don't talk about. And that's that there's almost this weird feeling that goes against everything you've been taught when you do cases that go to trial, true digital forensics, versus when you're doing incident response work. And there is a little bit of reprogramming and acceptance that needs to come with that transition. And I think that's something that we don't talk about. We talk about the technical skills. We talk about, you're not used to ransomware attacks. It's all the same tooling. It's all the same methodologies. But here's the knowledge set for getting schooled up on this. And a lot of people hang up on that. I think people sometimes miss that there's a little bit of, and not reprogramming, but acceptance you have to do to go against the grain in some ways of things you've been taught. And then if you go back, you've got to do that again.
So, and it's I would argue that it's not little. It's not a little bit.
No, that's true. It's major.
So different. In law enforcement, we have a crime scene. The goal is to slow things down. The goal is to slow things down and go slowly and methodically through and control the situation all the way through to the end result. And time isn't really the issue at that point. You're done when you're done, and you do it right. And in incident response, like, you can't sit around looking for a plan about how, the plan needs to come together fast, and it needs to be executed well and in an organized way with, the knowledge set there already. And you have to think about collection of that evidence at the same time that you're doing the response. And so it is a fundamental different thing, because that is a live ongoing crime scene that hasn't been secured yet, and securing that client and means that you're changing the environment. And, there's no way we're going to be able to go in and, shut everything down. That's right, like shut it all down, collect it all. That's what we need to do. And that's just not a possibility. Right?
It's a different first responder response, right? So I feel like in your previous work, the job was secure the scene, and now the job is stop the bleeding. Those are both first responder roles, but they're two different functions in first responder work. You need them both in many instances, but it's which one takes priority depending on the situation.
Yeah, and I think every incident response is going to have a little bit of both involved, right? But it takes that EMT response to stop the bleeding and get the patient stable first, and that changes data. And so yeah, that was something that Nathan had zero qualms about, and was really, really good at, and came with this whole wealth of knowledge. And so I took on sponge mode. I mean, technically, he's in a position where he's, sponge mode with some freckles, because of course I would push back and say, but we need to, right? Like we need to, and it worked, right? Like it come together into something that made sense. And so it took a lot of flexibility on my part and a lot of patience and flexibility on his part, to get past some of my necessary hangups. And by the way, those hangups still hangups. I'm calling them hangups now. That methodology, that law enforcement methodology, is still something I use every day, because we're still doing corporate investigative stuff. We're still doing civil litigation work. We're still doing traditional dead box forensics as well. So, but once we got on to the ransomware business as servicing people who've been victims, because no, we did not take on ransomware. Let me be clear. But once we got there, we ended up really growing, because we got on insurance panels, and then we needed to grow our capacity in order to meet the demand. And so we got, Nathan was supposed to be our first programmer. We ended up bringing on board Trenton, who is amazing and has skills that just won't quit. And then things started getting really fun, because we had this small core team of people who were each really good at their own areas, working together and collaborating in ways that I never would have imagined in law enforcement, because that skill set just wasn't available to me. And then, we hired more and more people. And so as of fall last year, we knew we had outgrown our space. We didn't have a place to put people or evidence things, right? And so we knew we needed to move, and we were doing so much more than forensics that the name didn't make sense anymore. So as a team, which was by then, I know I'll miss somebody, but Seth and Cody and Trenton and Nathan and me and a few other amazing hardworking folks. We brainstormed on the name, and Tetra reflects really the 4 lakes in the Madison area first, but the broader service areas that we're providing for people with incident response, forensics, proactive services, and those sorts of things. So we then moved to a really beautiful new building, had a successful round of Series A funding, which was another thing I've never been involved with before, right? As a part owner of a business that was growing, a little nerve-wracking, but led again by Scott, who just has fantastic business sense as a CEO and great instincts, and has done a lot to learn the market in forensics, and we've got great business development folks as well. So January we moved into our new offices and got our new furniture installed just in time for. And my desk goes up and down. I can stand, I can sit. It's all electronic, and it's across the lake from me.
So yeah, Magnet opened our new offices the week before everything closed. So,
and of course, right at first you're like, what does this mean for our business? But at the end of 2019, we were 20 people, and today I think we sit at 45 or 46.
Wow.
And we still have job openings listed on our website because we're growing. And I think we've got kind of a reputation for being a company that takes on the problem children in terms of clients. Like, we're good at holding hands and walking people through and making them comfortable and answering the questions over and over again and just being super patient. And our clients appreciate it, and our and the insurance companies and the attorneys that we work for appreciate it, and whatever we can do to help them in what's probably aside from COVID, the worst situation in life is these cases really do threaten livelihood. So yeah, the proactive services business is booming. There's now this little known requirement from the federal government that rolled out, I think, in June, called CMMC. And it's an attempt to, this is my worst word right now, increase everyone's cyber hygiene. I know. Why did we decide that this was the right word? I don't know. Something about the federal government, military, and hygiene. We can't drop that, right? But the goal is that if you're providing services under a federal contract, depending on what your circumstances are, you're required to be certified in CMMC, and so that's so we've built out products to help companies navigate that and document it, because there's documentation requirements. So yeah, we're growing and sort of reaching out in all sorts of different directions, and the world of cybercrime is so much bigger than and more complex than I ever had insight into in law enforcement. And on top of that, the part about growing a business and trying to do so successfully and in a way that keeps my core values and our core values as people in the business consistent, I think is a super challenge. So
I think it's really incredible because, I mean, as referenced when we were in your intro and in your career, you are one of the original, long-time forensics examiners who's been doing this a really, really long time. And when you're speaking about this transition and what you're continuing to learn, I think it's a great reminder to everybody about what I think is one of the best things about this field, which is you will never stop learning. You will never stop being overwhelmed by the amounts and types of data, incidents, challenges that you're going to see. And the way that you're hitting those head on and embracing it and saying, give me more, let me do more new things that take me out of my comfort zone, is fantastic and such an inspiration and motivation to everyone else.
Well, thanks. It's certainly been an adventure, and I'm learning to let go and trust my coworkers. And not that I didn't trust my coworkers in law enforcement, I absolutely did with my life, right? But
right.
In this situation, I'm trusting that when we're recruiting and hiring, we're looking at people who have a great cultural fit and have a diversity of knowledge and experience, and that diversity of knowledge and experience is going to grow our company in a way that I might not be able to totally predict, but it's going to be, number one, really hellaciously interesting, and number two, There's something in that unknown that's totally exciting. And yeah, that the continuous learning thing is amazing. And for those of you out there who fight imposter syndrome and fight that feeling that I can never know enough, which is all of us, right? Like I am not immune to that. I think the second you get super comfortable with the words, I don't know.
Yes.
Get comfortable with those words because you know these other words, but I can find out, right?
Yes.
So the second that you get comfortable with that, a lot of that drops away because you're not focusing on comparing yourself to what other people know. You're just having that metric about your own competency and confidence to be one that's totally internal and not measured externally.
It's really interesting. We've talked a lot about imposter syndrome because it's something that I think it's great to reference, especially when you're talking to people like you who are well known, who have such an amazing body of knowledge, and you're saying, yeah, that happens here. But I think the point that you're bringing up, that's the step past that, which is you have to move from imposter syndrome to acceptance of the fact that we can never know the entire body of this work, that this work is changing and evolving at such a rate, but that the right answer in that acceptance is to go, of course I don't know everything, but of course I have the resources to go and figure it out and to learn.
Yes, and so many times those resources are in other people who may not see the value of their own knowledge in comparison to everybody else's.
They might not realize how they fit in the puzzle or how they're filling that gap you don't have.
Exactly, and I could call some of these people out and talk about the conversations I've had with them to say, you are amazing, and what you have that I needed is something that everybody else needs in this body of knowledge. So find a way to share it, and that gets hard, right? It gets hard.
It does. It's scary.
Well, it's scary, and this is such a fast-moving world that by the time we figure it out and document it for whatever case we're working on, maybe we have to wait because it's still in trial, and then by the time it's out of trial and you're ready to write the blog post, it's the world has moved on, right? Like this context log thing from Android phones is so much more than was there an app installed that isn't anymore? Oh my God, the context log, if all I have on an Android exam is the context log, I have a great head start.
But here's the deal. So truly, none of it is ever old. I think that's still worth sharing because number one, you are going to run on cases that have older devices. We all do. So having that as part of the communal body of knowledge is still a value. But even more importantly, the methodology of what you used and found in those parts is still of value to understanding and learning and being able to take the next step and build on it. So even if that log isn't where it was stored in the same place anymore, or even if it's encoded differently now, that body of knowledge of how it was allows us to take that next step. So I would encourage, even if you have to wait till after trial and now it's older, there's still value to sharing it, especially if there's no other documentation about said artifact or process, etc.
And really, that has gotten so much better over time as people are starting to self-publish and people are starting to aggregate what's out there and make it easier to find and to digest.
Absolutely.
It almost becomes this question of like, I love Discord, except I get so lost in Discord. I love Twitter, but it's like such a tiny data point that like it frustrates me, and so I find that I move off of it. I love good old-fashioned books, right? Like good old-fashioned books, but they're going to be behind on certain things. They're also still amazing resources.
So what is your go-to resource? What's your go-to?
So right now, right on my table, which is my
It happens to be what's right on my table because I was just using it to do some work. So Sanderson's SQLite Forensics.
Sanderson's SQLite Forensics. I don't know what is. Yeah. So this is one right now, and I'm facing a cell phone exam question with a communication database where I'm trying to anonymize it as we talk.
Yes.
Where the last entry shows up in the journal file, doesn't show up in the database, but the index number, there's a gap there. When it's
so read the section on vacuum versus auto vacuum. And I've worked a chat database before. I'll talk to you about it offline, where I was able to write a formula to figure out at least the number of messages that had transpired that were gone, and was able to figure out how to. It's not the same chat application, I'm sure. Which message traffic they went to. It depends on how it is. But let's definitely talk about that afterwards.
And so really, for me, it's a question of I'm double checking my tools, because there's a tool that misses it. There's a tool that shows it as incoming, missed, and deleted. And it happened at a time that's really important for the case that I'm working on. And but Sanderson's forensic browser also does a really nice job of allowing you to bring back that rollback journal and automatically find out whether it's valid or invalid. And in this case, invalid is normal. Right, it means that the database had the last entry fully committed,
and that's so important because people don't always really know the difference between a live record and a not live record. And really, Sanderson's book and Sanderson's tool does the best job of this of anywhere else in forensics, and I really advocate for doing that, because there's a difference between bringing the journal in and making it live, and yeah.
And you can probably see, like, this is a go-to book.
Absolutely.
It's a book that I bring out again and again, and I don't expect my brain to hold every detail.
No, it's a constant. That's exactly why it was here. I was actually going back through some stuff on Freelist pages as I was fixing a lecture.
And then here's, this is an old version, but it's the Practical Mobile Forensics, and this one happened to be
signed by Heather.
Hi, Heather. It says, Cindy, collaborating with you was one of my wiser choices in life. Thanks for all you bring to me. Heather Mahala.
Heather's awesome. I must say my copy is not next to me of Practical Mobile Forensics, but it's my second edition. It's signed by Heather as well.
Well, and it's there because I was looking at open source choices for gaps where the tools that I'm using are a little frustrating.
Have you looked at Seeking Truth and Evidence from John Baer?
I have not.
You need to check that out. I think you'd really enjoy that. It's John Baer did a fantastic job. Good mobile forensics books, lots of open source references. Please check that out if you haven't.
Sure. It's we get to these points sometimes where our artifacts conflict with each other a little bit, or they're in argument, right? In this case, I have a context log that tells me that this messenger program was active well after the time that it supposedly was missed, and so it's like, is that missed flag correct? Is that like what's going on with this entry? So these are the mysteries I love to run down.
I love it.
And this is testing, right? Like, it's try to recreate the data that you are seeing, or give every option in test data, and then sort out what the answer is. But
yeah, critical. We can't assume things. We can't make assumptions about our evidence. We can't just trust our tools blindly. You've got to.
So, and that's, I mean, really, in my civilian role now, I'm finding so many times, and I hate to say this, but where law enforcement missed. And it just tells me that our work isn't done in trying to train people better to use the tools and to learn the concepts that they need to do this work, because they're overwhelmed. But in some of these cases, the misses are egregious. If you pull a logic of a phone and you don't see any call history or text messages, and make the decision that the phone wasn't being used during the time of a fatality crash, and you categorize everything as if it were a child pornography case, it tells me you weren't even thinking of this as a crash case, right? So that perspective is everything. And I know we've had arguments back and forth about whether forensic exams should be blind or if they should be educated by knowledge of what happened in the case. But I mean, this is another one where it's like, if you're looking for child pornography in a case where that's not even a factor, and what really is the question is, was this phone being used at the time of this accident? Then you're going to miss. And so definitely with a law enforcement background, don't want to be overly critical of law enforcement, but we do need to do due diligence in making sure that that we're applying the tools and the techniques correctly for the case that we're looking at. So,
well, I mean, you're just making an argument for the fact that forensics is needed by both sides. The flip argument is that what if forensics wasn't attached to a side? What if it was an independent? There's lots of different ways it could be approached.
And this is even a case where I'm acting as a defense expert, right? Like I use very, very regularly, and it has to be some overt problem, but very, very, I don't know if I said regularly, I meant irregular.
Irregular.
Rarely do them. But this is a case where what should have been a criminal case ended up being a civil case fought out by insurance companies after the fact. So, which happens all the time. So my other go-to book right now,
very different.
Book. Yeah.
Building an inclusive. So I need to, for the posterity of the fact that this is a podcast, state these books. So the first book we were talking about was SQLite Forensics by Paul Sanderson. The second one we were talking about was Practicable Mobile Forensics by Heather Mahalik et al., the second edition. That's the one with the BlackBerry. So.
Yes, and like I said, it is an older book, but the thing that I was looking for in it was not something that needed to be
absolutely. Right. And now the book that you are holding up is Building an Inclusive Organization, Leveraging the Power of a Diverse Workforce by, can you hold it down a little bit lower so I can see the author?
Stephen Frost.
Stephen Frost. Awesome.
Yes. And so what I love about this book is that it's not just going, it just doesn't just talk about diversity and building a diverse workforce. It talks about building an inclusive workforce that really does build off the strengths of all of the differences of the people in the organization, and how to be sensitive to those and respectful of them, and how to use them to build a stronger, more profitable business. So
absolutely.
So excellent book. This is the Tetra Book Club's current book.
I love that.
Yeah, we have a book club, and our first book was How to Win Friends and Influence People. Classic, right? Classic. Been around forever. And then this is our second book. We've been doing this since the COVID started. It's one of our ways to try to keep people in touch with each other, right? So
absolutely.
So Tetra buys the books, and we all take some time to discuss them.
That's awesome. You know, I think it's great that you're taking a really big focus on inclusivity in the workforce. And I think that it's really important to mention that can mean a bunch of different things. But at the end of the day, to me, it means that people are participating to their fullest because they feel engaged, they feel included. And at the end of the day, it's going to get you the best solutions and the best answers to the hardest problems, because you have difference of background and opinions and thought methodologies working together to hit problems, and you're going to excel. So I love that.
And everybody feels like they matter because they do matter.
Because they do matter. That's exactly it. It allows everyone to excel. And I just think that's awesome that as a leader that you're doing that.
And so you may not be able to see the title of
I cannot read that one. Can you read the title and author?
I can tell you that it was signed on the inside by a guy named Ray Melbourne in September of 1936, but it is called
Microbe Hunters by Paul de Croft.
Yes, and this is another classic book. I happen to be reading, I think, let's see, when, oh yes, so this bookmark is from Paris, France. It's about how to use the telephone at the hotel I was in, teaching. But this really walks through the history of the discovery of microbes.
Oh, fascinating.
I don't know if you can read any of that, but I pulled it back out and started reading it when the pandemic started because it gives me hope. Like this field of science has come so far and beaten so many invisible warriors that I truly believe that the solution to our current problem is going to be found through science, and that given enough time and enough motivation and curious brains working on the problem and enough happy accidents, will come out of it. So this, yes.
And you know what? It's a lot like our forensic research, right? We do what we work on the problems we need to solve today. And sometimes we have happy accidents, and sometimes it takes a lot of grit and a lot of work and a lot of collaboration to figure out these problems.
And these people built off of each other. Like every scientist listed in here, there's one per chapter. They tell these personal stories that are hilarious and sad and funny, and it's hilarious and funny. So, I mean, there's a good sense of humor to this, and the language is just so fun. So, so if you're looking for a forensics read that isn't digital forensics, this is a good recommendation. And the good part is I didn't even have to walk out of my dining room work area to bring you these resources, because this is where they have collected. Actually, I did walk to the kitchen to get the inclusive organization one because I was outside. So
I love that. And you really just tipped on something. You said that a lot of them in that Microbe book are sharing kind of their stories from the field. So I was wondering if you had a story from the field you could share with us.
Oh, what a really nice segue. So we also mentioned happy accidents. You said unique story that nobody had heard before, and I have lots of stories, many of which nobody's heard before, but one in particular about happy accidents. In about, let's see, I retired in 2016. So 2014, I had an intern in my lab who was learning to do cell phone forensics. And this intern, his name is Andrew Muir, and he's now working for the State Department. He was working for Madison Police Department for several years, but moved on to the State Department. And so he had been watching me do phone after phone in a drug overdose case. So I processed one phone, processed the next phone, processed the third phone. We did, some minimal reporting on them to get the information out to the detectives about what was going on. And we had about come to the end of the day, and he had 3 reps, right, as a watcher. And so I said, Andrew, we've got some time. I need to work on reports. Why don't you go grab a phone out of the box in the evidence room of found phones? So these are phones that got turned in by citizens, and we need to figure out who they belong to before they can go home, right? And obviously, it's a low priority work in terms of what a police department does, but it gave us good practice, and so he grabbed a phone out of the bin. Started processing it, and I felt before I heard him say, "Oh no," and I'm like, "Oh crap, what did he find?" Well, I've been typing on this report. Did I just put the ugliest child porn case in front of this youngin? What did I just do? And I'm like, "What's wrong?" And he says, "You know how you said don't commingle data? I think I did that someplace." And hands up keyboard. Hands up keyboard.
Yeah. Let's.
Tell me what you were doing. And he's like, well, I set it up to send this phone over to this area, double checked. he's got it in the right case number for the found phone. Everything was separated the way it was supposed to be. He was doing absolutely everything right. Turned out the phone he picked from that box had been dropped on State Street during a fight in January. We were doing this examination in August, and that phone belonged to the drug dealer who was the suspect in all of the other phones. So we had processed one of his other phones in that case earlier in the day, and what Andrew was seeing was phone numbers and names.
Oh my gosh!
We had the previous.
So his assumption was that he had accidentally commingled with the case he had just worked, like accidentally synced back, but it actually turned out to coincidentally be from the same group. That is insane.
Total random pull from probably, I mean, not total random, right? But from a box that had 60 or 70 phones in it, just like pick one and process it so we can get this phone back to its owner. And so after we figured it out, and I was like, no way, right? Like that is just the most beautiful piece of synchronicity ever. I called the detective and I said, okay, so I don't quite know how to handle this without making it like science fiction. But here's what we have. And it turned out to be really good evidence. And I've never had anybody, ask me to explain that. I don't think you can, right? Like it's just
that's just random.
Yeah, and like he thought he was in trouble. He thought he was, he had screwed up. And
it was much more likely that it was an error than it was that coincidence.
So that's my strange story from the field that that probably not many people have heard, and that brings back the synchronicity part of things. So.
Absolutely, right? Everything for a reason. Sometimes when you don't expect it.
It's like, how do I write this report without it sounding like fiction? Right? Like, I don't know. I don't know, except that's what happened. So.
Speaking of things we wouldn't expect, what's something people might not expect about Cindy Murphy?
Wow, we're good. You'd think we practiced this, and we really didn't. So I think people wouldn't expect that my primary mode of transportation is a 1997 Mercedes-Benz E320 convertible.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a mid-90s rapper mobile, basically. It's a beautiful car, but it belonged to my dad. And he died in 2011. And it still hurts, but I'm driving his car, which is
every day. Like this is your regular grocery getter.
Except
for now. Sorry.
Yeah, you're right. Not for the next work. I'll need to go out and start the car once in a while. The battery die, but yeah, after he died, it sat in the garage for about a year, and then went through the house to visit with my stepmom, and said, "Hey, are you planning on selling that car? Because I'm interested." So I was in law enforcement. I knew enough about cars that I knew more than my stepmom. So she called me and said, "Hey, tell me what's a fair price for this car?" And my dad, just to set the background, like for the years before he died, every time I would go for a ride in that car, he'd say, "Now, Cindy, this car has lots of tips and tricks. And if you have a Mercedes or have driven one, like it has all these hidden triggers, right? So if you want to fill your car with gas, you have to turn the car off and take the key out of the ignition before the gas will open. If you have the key in the car, it won't pop open."
Interesting.
Right? So once in a while you're like, something's broke, and then you move your foot off the brake and suddenly it works, right? And so my dad had always been running through, well, here's what you need to do if ever you need to put the roll bar up, or you need to take the top down, or you need to do whatever, right? And so as she asked that question, I'm hearing all of that advice go through my head, and I'm like, oh my God, my dad wanted me to have that car. Right, like he was telling me those secrets.
Yeah, because he knew it was going to be.
Yeah, and so I told her the amount, and then I went to sleep that night, and I had a dream that I was driving across the country to Montana, where my twin sister lives, and that Dad was in the passenger seat, and I was driving.
Oh.
Oh my God. I like, here I am. I'm this studious, geeky law enforcement person.
Are you driving a?
This car.
That is awesome. I love it.
Yeah, I was at a golf course for a funeral after thing, playing with my band in a socially distanced, responsible way earlier this summer. And as I was leaving with the cello in the back of it sticking up like a passenger, hey, nice car. And I said, yeah, it was my dad's. And I said, it still feels strange sometimes to be driving it every day. And he said, why? Because you're too conservative. And for those of you who know me, like politically, I'm not conservative. So I just laughed and I'm like, no, probably the opposite, right? Like probably the opposite. This fairly gas guzzling machine that's built for speed and looks is not what people would expect me to drive. Probably.
I do love the fact that I'm envisioning it with the top down and the cello sitting there in the passenger seat next to you.
Yeah, so it would be that cello, which on the other side, I know I'm not supposed to move, but it has a face. Can you see the face?
Yeah, yes. So for people who are listening, so Cindy is sitting in her dining room, which now has become a multi-purpose room with COVID, and it both is a part music room with some of her collection of amazing string instruments on the wall, as well as where she is working from. And she just turned around her cello case, and it appears on the neck and then head where the knobs would be to tune it, to have a face with the design of the case between the way the handle pops out and some of the other intricacies that I can't tell. And it really does look like a face. So
eyes on it just because it looked like a face.
Oh, so. You did put the eyes. Okay, I was trying to figure out what they were.
When I put the case on my bag, it looks like I'm giving a piggyback ride to some strange robot being. It all works.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. I do want to let you know that Kevin Pagano mentioned that with your story you were just telling about the field and that happy coincidence that you totally should have played lottery after.
Well, I think I already hit the lottery. I don't think it would.
You can't hit it twice, right?
Lightning doesn't strike twice.
Very, very good point. You had literally hit the lottery of those phones in finding the one randomly that worked with the case. So I love that. I love that. So getting back to students like your intern who were learning from that, what's your advice to those who want to get into digital forensics?
So this is actually a question I get all the time. And, it's interesting. I recently got a LinkedIn message from a person who reached out to compliment a talk I did about digital forensics and, sort of the ground truth, the things we take for granted that aren't real. And
I remember that talk. It's excellent.
This was an amazing talk and it changed my life. And this happened in the middle of COVID. And so I didn't respond to it immediately, and it went down in the message box on LinkedIn. Is not my primary form of communication. And then just last week, he reached back out and he's like, I can't believe you didn't answer me. And, I thought I had found the best mentor ever, but apparently not. You're so consumed with your thoughts of money and whatever else that you couldn't take the time to answer.
No.
And I was like, wow, my talk was about confirmation bias. And I have now confirmed for you by not answering one message in the middle. So I felt bad because people are really, I felt bad, and I also typed him a message about confirmation bias and said, think what you want, but in the middle of a pandemic, you're asking a little much. So anyway, it's a question that's important to people because they really truly do want to know how to break in. And as a person who fell into this by a happy accident, by a piece of amazing synchronicity, it's one that I can only answer from the perspective of having watched a lot of people come into the field afterwards. And the advice is from me is learn how your brain learns and exercise that muscle hard.
Okay.
Consume as much as you can. And I don't mean that in terms of reading every book you can, reading every blog you can. I mean, have discussions with people who are in the field, and have them from the standpoint of not just about artifacts, but about the methods that they use to test things, the methods
Absolutely.
To figure out the problems, because artifacts will change, but the strategies about how to perform the science, how to do the testing, how to check your own biases, and how to double check what your tools are telling you, those strategies are all the same. And this is such a vast field, and it's growing every day. And it's just like this explosive thing that's happening as technology advances. Don't hitch your ponies to something really specific right off the bat.
I think that's really good advice, not to hitch up to something really, really fast, but also to talk about methodology. I think it's important. I'm actually giving a talk on methodology to HTCI Arizona at the end of the month, because that's exactly what they asked for. They asked for, can you talk about testing methodology? And it made me realize that it's important to look at different people's testing methodology, right? Like, I love David Cowan's Forensics Test Kitchen because I get to see how he tests. And it's so different than how I test, which sounds bizarre to say, but we all do things slightly different. And like Owen did this whole big thing about confirmation bias and how do you know what you're not addressing recently in the SANS keynote that he gave with Daryl and in a presentation at AAFS. And I think you're hitting something so important about learning methodologies from others, because I'm always learning from other people's methodologies, but we have to share that. And that's something that's really a good focal point to work on.
It's interesting where there seems to be a real hunger for, what tools should I learn? What certification, what knowledge should I gain? What degree should I get? What program is the best? And what I'm finding is that when I look at prospective employees as an employer, those things show me somebody's dedication to getting into the field, and they show me that people have put in the work. But what I'm looking for is someone who has a well-rounded understanding of the fact that that all of those things have limitations, and when we come across the real world practical problems, being able to think creatively and apply that creative thought to solving the problem and to figuring out the underlying artifacts is super important. So
it goes back to what you were saying earlier about the acceptance of the I don't know. Like accepting that you don't know everything, but the step beyond that is knowing how to deal with it. And that's the testing methodology. That's the not taking the logical and going, no, there's no SMS messages, so therefore there's no chats. It's the knowing, which you do need a knowledge base for, but you also need to understand how to test, how to derive the right kind of evidence. How do you figure out what was done? And totally makes sense.
Where do I start with this? Even with an Android cell phone, like where do I start in this sea of data, which may not be a huge sea of data, but like if you've got 150 gaming apps, which one do I look at? Like if I suspect that this person was playing in a row, how do I figure out which one to look at? Which, again, brings me back to that context log, because, this nice running picture of what's happening, or at least some of the things happening on the phone.
I bet you Lenita Hinch, if she's listening to this, is about dying laughing right now, because I ran through a draft talk with her last week about a testing methodology. And I specifically was showing the example of how you'd know where to start on an Android phone that was full of nothing but games. So it's just funny because that was exactly the example I was showing.
Right. I mean,
very small world.
The problems we're working on are similar to each other, and
absolutely,
and they come up over and over and over again. It's not unique situation to have someone using their phone while they drive, right? And
what?
So the methodology to go about that case versus a child pornography case or a hacking case or a employee data theft case or a intellectual property case, the methodologies can be slightly different to get you to the answer in a more efficient way.
And it's interesting because that's what you were talking about earlier, right? That sometimes people are programmed to only look at a case one way, and because of that, they may be missing things. And so I feel like it's all full circle, everything you're saying, right? Because then when you were giving your example of your movement from law enforcement to doing more IR and corporate cases, et cetera, one of those lessons you had to learn, and one of the things you've learned that law enforcement sometimes misses because they're programmatically, and that's why it's so important to look at different people's methodologies, not just one person or your own. And it's such a tie-in.
Yeah, there you go. That's and so that is my best advice. And don't be afraid to reach out to people that you might be intimidated to reach out to, but also don't have a built-in expectation that you're going to get an immediate answer.
But to be honest, it's also okay to re-ping somebody. Yeah. I am going to say I am the first person to get a slew of messages, and I'll read them so then they're no longer marked read. And in an email, it's easy because I can flag it. But like Twitter DMs and LinkedIn messages don't allow me to flag things. So if I don't have the moment to respond right then, I'll try to make myself a to-do list note. But if I'm only on my phone, I can't do that in the same place where I would actually go back and do the work. So please, please, please ping us again. We're not intentionally ignoring you. We just are swamped sometimes, and sometimes we have just too many digital communication means between Discord and Twitter and LinkedIn and Reddit, and we got messages coming everywhere.
You should have seen the comedy of errors that it was for me to get onto Skype this morning because it's been so long since I used it. Oh my God. I'm like, I think we have that built-in tech time because
absolutely
not that I wasn't fielding other things at the same time, right? Like but it is, being flexible and keeping that creative mind focused and honed in. I have always said to people, I'm never going to claim to be the smartest person in the room, and I love it when there are people in the room who are smarter than I am. But I will say that I am at least as strong creatively as I am with my digital intelligence, my digital forensics information, right? Like the stuff from books, and the combination of those two things is really important. People skills are definitely as important as the technical skills. And so if you're trying to break into this world and you're having a hard time, work on those people skills. Maybe go back to that book that we How
to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Peanut bowl?
Peanut butter and people. I must be getting hungry for lunch. I think I'm going to have peanut butter after this.
But my point being that if you're trying to break into this world, which is full of amazing people, and most of us are misfits, honestly, right? Like most of us are a little bit different from I'm not saying we're outcasts, but
slightly off kilter. We have certain characteristics that allow us to dig deep into data, allow us to think outside the box. So there are some, but you're right, at the same time, to be client facing, there are certain skills you need to have. It's not just even about working with the forensics team.
And I would argue not just client facing, but to interface well with other forensic examiners, to get the information you need, you have to work on those people skills. And you have to remember that other people need to get something out of the conversation too, in order for it to be a valuable conversation on both sides.
Absolutely.
And
you also mentioned that people are resources, right? So if you need to be able to tap those resources, you need to be able to communicate effectively with people in a way that they want to help you.
Yes, and this all sounds so transactional, but it really isn't, right? Like that's how real relationships are built, and how long-lasting friendships are built. And when you get those go-to resources as friends in this business, it's easy to shine, right? Like when you're standing on the shoulders of Brian Carrier and Owen
Absolutely.
And Heather Mahalik is signing her books over.
Absolutely.
People are actually your friends. And the list for me is huge. When I'm standing on those shoulders, Ovi Carroll, I don't feel bad about calling Bill Teal on any moment, and I don't feel bad about calling Bob Elder or Sam Brothers or anybody else if I have a question. I'm comfortable saying to them, I don't know, and I'm comfortable telling them that they don't either. But here's how they would go about solving the problem. And so if they don't give me the answer, at least what they provide for me is a different strategy about how to search for that answer.
Different methodology. And sometimes a different connection, because I got a message today from somebody that asked I do something, and oh, you know what? Let me introduce you to Mike Williamson. I know he was just doing work in exactly that artifact. So I'm not going to answer. I don't have the answer to your question at this moment. I would have to research it, but I know who does. I know who's been working on that in the field. And by connecting people to each other and building that network, and now that person also now knows Mike. And so we build our network, but now I also know that person, and I know what kind of problems they're now working on. And so we by growing that network, and I think you're right. Raj Karan, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I apologize if I didn't. I see that you just asked the question about how you start your career. And I think that what Cindy is providing right here is really that pivotal thing to make sure that you have those foundational skills of communication. And
and then use them, right? Like and keep at it. So if there's an organization in your area, like Wisconsin Association of Computer Crimes Investigators in my area, join it. IASIS, right? Like get involved in forensic focus and in posting there. Look at all of those online resources, DFIR training and the artifact sharing areas, and participate. And when you participate, you find that those conversations naturally happen. And this field is one that, pandemic or not, economic disaster or not, this field is growing, and we need good strong people, not just on the technical side, but who also have those great people skills. So work on both equally, and ask the questions and take advantage of the free resources. SANS has just a million, not a million. That's a way overestimate, but they have a full set of sources out there on YouTube, and you can listen to talks from DFIR summits and other summits going way back. And you can reach out to those people and talk to them, and if you don't hear back from everybody, you're going to hear back from somebody, right? Like not every packet comes back. Not every packet comes back, but when you start, if you have a conversation today that lasts for 2 emails, maybe 6 months from now, the person's going to recognize your name, and that email string will end up being more. And then this makes me realize that I owe Adrian Leon, I wonder if he's listening out there, but I owe him an email because he and I correspond on a regular basis. He emailed me, and it's still sitting in my Gmail account waiting for a response. So, that's been a while. Yes, this is one of those people I would have called out for underestimating his own value to the community a great deal. As content creator, as creative thinker, as all of those things, just a really great, fun, all around person. And
an amazing person.
In an amazing way, right? Like we have great people in this community. So,
And you just bring up that great point. Don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to communicate. I'll say at this point, if you've pinged me and I owe you a message, please reping me. It's not on purpose, so I'll take that reminder. Please don't be afraid. Sometimes we just have a lot in our inboxes, and I really wish I could flag and in some of those resources.
Right, like you ping me now. With my mom's positive COVID test, you're probably not going to hear back from me for a bit.
For a couple of days, right? Absolutely.
Or longer, right? Like I may totally like shut off this part of my life for a while.
And that's okay.
In order to deal with what's right in front of me. But yeah, reping me, right? Like and don't hold a grudge about it. It's just the way life works sometimes. So.
And, in terms of that just-in-timeness, by building those relationships, when somebody then sees something that reminds them of you, they're going to let you know about that opportunity. I've definitely seen that happen many times in this field. I know that people have had that occur. So by reaching out and making those relationships and talking about what they shared, people remember who you are.
Yeah, I would say like we have. I don't know, maybe 6 job openings right now posted on our website, and they're not all straight up, forensics jobs. But what I would say is we get tons and tons of applications, and we have a great recruiter who goes through them and reaches out to people, and the ones that stick out are the ones that continue those conversations. And if you get a phone call, follow up with a card. Everybody likes to get a physical card, right? Everybody likes a thank you card. It just tells you're just going above and beyond. Or follow up with that phone call to say thanks for the opportunity to have the conversation. So.
And I just, as Magnet, dropped the link to the Join Our Team page on Tetra Defense's website if anyone's interested in those opportunities.
I'll probably be like, Cindy, I've got applications in I can read before 2021. But yeah, we are, I think I am not seeing the end to our growth. Hopefully we're going to grow slow enough and smart enough to take on all of the challenges, infrastructure-wise and process-wise, and those sorts of things to grow. But we're hiring for everything from helping companies restore after ransomware attacks, so straight up IT support work, but solid people who are specialized in rebuilding systems in secure ways, networks and systems in secure ways. Up to DFIR positions, and I think we just hired an office manager, which I'm so happy about.
Oh, congratulations!
And in an office that's been mostly shut down, but our workforce is now nationwide, and we have actually a few programmers out of the country. In Brazil, I think is where they're located. So we're in the same time zone, and that's been an interesting leap of faith, right? To take on a remote workforce with all of the challenges of the work that we're doing. So,
congratulations on all of your growth, as an organization, of what you've built there at Tetra Defense, as you continue to be able to help more people solve more problems, and you're helping more people have work in the field, and everything that you give back to the community, and all of your success. Thank you.
Hey,
thank you so much.
And thank you for all of the support from Magnet for all of the years. And you can literally talk to Jad. When I said beg, borrow, or steal to get what I needed to get done in law enforcement, Jad was always there with trial licenses, with beta testing products, and I paid back in terms of trying to provide information and data for parsing different artifacts where I could. I think I can claim Bitcoin wallets because I provided him the first data to work on those.
Oh, that's awesome.
I can also claim at least some influence for his delving into mobile, because I was applying every tool I could to mobile, including tools that weren't that weren't designed for it. And Axiom actually, I got it to massage some mobile data into some parsed stuff, and he was like, "Oh, that's cool. I wonder if we can make that happen." And boy, has he!
Chad is incredible. Like I cannot express to people how incredible he is. So, but thank you for giving back. Thank you for your appreciation of what we're doing here, and just thank you for being you and being such a force and being such a role model and an inspiration to me, because you really have been and continue to be. And thank you just from the bottom of my heart for everything you do. And I hope everyone really appreciated all of your wisdom today and your fun stories.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, just hearing that I'm a role model to you is humbling, because it still strikes me as strange, because as I'm just moving through the world trying to get the problem solved in front of me, it's not something that I consider. So, but I appreciate knowing it.
It's 100% true. You know, as somebody who worked in a mobile forensics lab and was in seeing you lead in the field as another woman, because representation does matter, who was just kicking butt and moving on to start your own company as a second career after retirement, and all that you've given back, and some of your really unique research, everything from your presentation that you did about how we sometimes get things wrong from the data recovery layer and what you learned there, to your presentation that you did with, I believe, Matt Linton and some others on musicality and how that plays into who digital forensics examiners are. Yeah. You've continued to provide those out-of-the-box resources that helps expand our brain to go, how would I do that? And your methodologies are like those same types of how do other people approach problems. And that's really helped me grow as an examiner and as a person. And so really, truly, you are a role model. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I probably put one of the first process papers out there just because there was nothing else. Yeah. And it's come so far from there. But yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you again. And thank you, everyone else, for joining us. Jad, who actually was just mentioned, actually just released an important project that I'd want to mention before we drop off, and I just dropped that in the link, and it's the Oxterra project. And the Oxterra project is a way for forensics examiners to do DFIR for good. So if you're interested in finding ways to give back your time to help organizations, check out that link that we just announced today. And Jad will actually be our guest on November 6th, so I'm sure he'll share more about that then. Please join us next week when we'll have Trey Amick on, and then we've got a great lineup past there, including Elon Wright, James Duffy, Devin Ackerman, Ladrina Sharon, Shelley Geisbrecht, Mitch Kaiser, Veronica Schmidt, Shana Daly, Kevin Brightwell, Rob Duhart, Geraldine Blay, Brian Moran, Lenita Hinch. We're actually all the way scheduled through the end of the year, so there's more great people past there. You can check out our hub page, magnetforensics.com/cash up. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.